Welcome back to New Game Plus. Last time we covered divorce. Today we're covering the financial restart with the single worst PR campaign in the history of modern finance. A legal mechanic so aggressively misrepresented that even the lawyers who file it for you sometimes don't know how it works. I'm talking about bankruptcy, the word that makes people go quiet at dinner tables, the thing people describe in hushed tones like they're confessing to a crime, the financial event that, according to decades of cultural messaging, ruins your life, marks you forever, and signals to the universe that you are a person of weak moral character who probably also kicks dogs. None of that is true. We're going to get into why. And the people who convinced you it was true. They have a financial services license and a yacht. Strap in. Chapter 1. The respawn screen. What actually just happened. Bankruptcy is not a financial death sentence. It is a forced respawn, a legal mechanism baked directly into the United States Code, Title 11, specifically designed to give people a fresh start after unmanageable debt. The founding fathers put debt relief in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. They had opinions about debtors' prison, strong ones. The current bankruptcy system exists because the government looked at the concept of infinite, inescapable debt and said, yeah, no, that's not the vibe. The credit card industry looked at the same thing and said, wait, actually? And thus, 40 years of shame-based marketing was born. Here's the actual mechanic. Bankruptcy wipes most of your unsecured debt, credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, the financial debris field you've been orbiting for however long. It drops a debuff on your credit score. It puts a flag on your credit report that has an actual expiration date, which makes it the only debuff in the entire financial system that auto removes. Everything else just festers. The flag lasts 10 years for Chapter 7, 7 years for Chapter 13. After that, the system forgets. The game literally forgets. Your credit report does not have a permanent record setting. It has a timer. The respawn comes with damage. That's known. A credit score of 700 can drop to 400 something overnight. But here's the part the credit industry forgot to mention in their 40-year campaign. Federal Reserve research shows the average filer's score climbs back to around 700 within 8 to 10 years. Getting a mortgage after bankruptcy isn't the exception. It's just what happens when people rebuild. And the people who don't file, the ones who white-knuckle through unmanageable debt out of honor or shame or some vague sense that suffering through it is the responsible choice. They recover slower, higher balances in collections, more accounts in delinquency, worse outcomes across the board. The people who filed, the irresponsible ones, ended up in better financial shape than the people who didn't. Sit with that. Chapter 2, Class Selection, choosing your bankruptcy build. Before you do anything else, you have to pick your class. Yes, bankruptcy has classes. The legal code is divided into chapters, and the two chapters that matter for regular humans are Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. I know we are inside our own Chapter 2 of this video talking about Legal Chapter 7 and Legal Chapter 13. I do not have the authority to fix this. Take it up with Congress. Let me explain what each class actually does because most people pick one with approximately zero information. The fast class. Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is the speedrun route. You file. A trustee looks over your assets. Most of your unsecured debt, credit cards, medical bills, personal loans gets wiped. 3 to 6 months later, you walk out clean. No repayment plan, no monthly tribute, no 5-year campaign. The catch. In theory, the trustee can sell off non-exempt assets to pay creditors. In practice, most Chapter 7 cases are no asset cases because federal and state exemptions cover almost everything a regular human owns. We'll get into the inventory in the next chapter. For now, just know, 95% of Chapter 7 cases result in successful discharge. The CFPB analyzed 5 million credit records and confirmed Chapter 7 also wins on credit recovery speed. Fast class, high completion rate, best meta in the game by a wide margin. The slow class. Chapter 13. Chapter 13 is the long play. You don't get instant discharge. Instead, you commit to a 3 to 5 year repayment plan, paying a portion of your debt back under the watchful eye of a bankruptcy trustee who has seen everything and is impressed by none of it. What you get in exchange, you keep all your assets, even ones that might not be protected in Chapter 7, including the house, even if you're behind on the mortgage. Chapter 13 has a unique mechanic that lets you cure mortgage defaults over the life of the plan, which is the actual reason people pick it, despite the slower timeline and the trustee oversight. The downside, only about 40% of Chapter 13 filers actually complete the plan. The harder class has a 60% wipeout rate. 5 years of monthly payments is a lot of game time for anyone whose income situation is, by definition, already unstable. But, and this is genuinely surprising, Chapter 13 makes you 13.2 percentage points more likely to own a home in the 5 years after filing. That's from actual academic research published in the Review of Economics and Statistics, which is not a publication known for jokes. The slow class class has better homeownership unlock rates, different playstyle, different loot drops. W2 picks your class. You don't actually. The means test does. The means test is a literal government calculation that determines whether you are poor enough to use the fast class. I want you to understand that I did not write that sentence sarcastically. That is the actual mechanic. The government runs the numbers on your income versus your state's median income, then runs a second calculation on your expenses versus what you have left over. The spreadsheet tells you which chapter you're allowed to file. It was added in 2005 as part of a law called the Bankruptcy Abuse Prevention and Consumer Protection Act, BAPCPA, which is pronounced BAPSA like a sneeze, and was named by people who wanted to imply that bankruptcy filers were abusers who needed to be protected against. The 2005 patch nerfed the fast class pretty significantly. The devs in their wisdom added the means test gate specifically to push higher income filers into chapter 13. Here's how the gate works. If your income is below your state's median, you're through automatically. Above median, the system runs the second calculation. If your monthly expenses eat enough of your income that there's nothing meaningful left over to pay creditors, you still qualify for chapter 7. If there is something left over, you get pushed to chapter 13. The system literally decides your build for you based on a spreadsheet. Welcome to the future. Chapter 3, inventory check. What you keep, what gets wiped. Let's talk about what's actually in your inventory after the respawn, because the cultural narrative here is you lose everything, and the actual answer is almost certainly not. Most chapter 7 cases are no asset cases. You keep your stuff. The image of a trustee showing up to take your couch and your TV is mostly fiction, a horror story the credit industry uses to make the fast class sound scarier than it is. The trustee is looking for non-exempt assets above certain thresholds. Most regular humans don't have those. Most regular humans walk out with everything they came in with minus the debt. Your retirement account is protected. Federal exemptions include unlimited protection for most retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, pensions. Creditors cannot touch them. The IRS can come for your retirement account under certain circumstances. Creditors mostly cannot. The thing you are most afraid of losing is the thing you are legally prevented from losing. Isn't that a fun twist? The homestead exemption can protect your home equity up to $31,575 under federal exemptions for filings right now, and in states like Texas and Florida, the homestead protection is functionally unlimited. Texas said no, actually keep the mansion, and meant it. The you'll lose your house fear is frequently wrong, and the states that went hardest on homestead protection did so because their legislators had apparently read a history book about debtors' prison and had thoughts. What does get wiped? Most unsecured debt, credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, the financial asteroid field. What does not get wiped automatically? Recent taxes, most child support and alimony, and supposedly student loans. I said supposedly. We're going to talk about student loans in a second, and I need you to be sitting down. Chapter 4, the student loan discharge cheat. Nobody tries. The student loan industry has, for approximately 30 years, successfully convinced the American public, most bankruptcy attorneys, and apparently several federal judges that student loans cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. This is not true. The CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which exists specifically to protect consumers from financial predation and is therefore constantly under attack, has stated explicitly the myth is not true because, in fact, student loans can be discharged in bankruptcy. That's a direct quote from the government about a myth that the student loan industry invented and then maintained for decades. Here's the actual number. Research by Villanova law professor Jason Giuliano found that roughly half the people who actually try to discharge student loans in bankruptcy get some or all of it erased, about 50%, 1 in 2, half. The catch is that almost nobody tries, because almost everyone, including their lawyers, has been told it's impossible. Giuliano described it as an unprecedented situation in the law. Nowhere else have so many people sought legal relief while so few have obtained it. A nationwide misinformation campaign run by an industry that profits when you believe your debt is inescapable that successfully convinced lawyers to not even attempt a legal maneuver that works half the time. Lenders preemptively settle cases that would form the basis for broader student debt cancellation through bankruptcy, specifically to avoid setting precedent. The threat of filing is sometimes worth more than filing. The creditors know this. They've known it for 30 years. The button exists. It's labeled. Half the people who press it win. Nobody presses it because the industry spent 30 years taping a broken sign over it. Press the button. Chapter 5, the hidden mechanics. Stuff nobody patches into the tutorial. A few mechanics the game does not explain at character creation. First, credit card companies will offer you new cards almost immediately after discharge. This sounds insane. The logic is brutal. Once you complete Chapter 7, you cannot file Chapter 7 again for 8 years. 8-year cooldown timer. You are now legally legally the safest customer on the market. You literally cannot escape new debt through the same mechanism for nearly a decade. Lenders know this. They are not being generous. They are being predatory with full knowledge of your legal constraints. The NPCs circle the second your discharge clears. Do not pick up the sword. You know what the sword does. You just watched it do it. Second, you can get an FHA mortgage 2 years after bankruptcy. 2 years. Most people think it's 7 to 10. They're wrong by half a decade minimum. FHA requires a 580 credit score and a 3.5% down payment after the waiting period. VA loans have no official minimum, but most lenders want 620. Conventional loans want 620, 680. The homeownership unlock is not a decade away. It is 2 years away. The tutorial lied to you about the timer. Third, bankruptcy does not show up on a criminal background check. It is not a crime. It is a legal process. A bankruptcy-specific background check exists and is run by some employers. Federal jobs, financial services, security clearance roles, but most employers never run it. Most jobs never see it. The unemployable forever narrative is, like most of the narratives in this video, a story that benefits the people who want you to feel trapped. Fourth, federal law prohibits employers from firing you, refusing to hire you, or taking adverse action against you solely because of a bankruptcy. The bankruptcy code protects you from job discrimination. The law is on your side. It just doesn't take out ads. Fifth, and this one is genuinely my favorite, the Chapter 7 filing fee is $330. Chapter 13 is $313. Fee waivers are available if you genuinely cannot afford it. People do not file bankruptcy because they cannot afford to file bankruptcy. The respawn costs $338. The game will waive the fee if you ask. Nobody tells you to ask. Chapter 6, Speedrun Strats, the recovery timeline. Here is the actual recovery curve because the cultural narrative has the timeline wrong by approximately everything. Within 6 months of discharge, your score may stabilize or begin to climb. Not years, 6 months. The debt that was destroying your utilization ratio is gone. The collection accounts stop accumulating. The bleeding stops. Within 1 to 3 years, many people reach 650 to 700. The ruined for life narrative is a story the credit card industry profits from. The actual timeline is 1 to 3 years to functional credit. The 10-year mark is when the flag comes off the report entirely, not when you become a viable credit participant again. Those are different events that the shame campaign has been conflating since roughly 1984. The credit utilization respawn is real. When the debt is discharged, your ratio resets. Available credit recalibrates. This is part of why scores climb faster in years 2 and 3 than most people expect. The math changes. The game notices. By years 8 to 10, the Federal Reserve data puts the average filer at around 700, near the national median. Not recovering from bankruptcy, just a normal credit score in the normal range, where normal people are. The people who white-knuckled through without filing are statistically still behind. Chapter 7, the boss fight. Shame. This is the mechanic nobody names. The actual final boss of the bankruptcy run is not the means test, not the trustee, not the creditors. It's the shame. The stigma hypothesis. The academic claim that bankruptcy carries such severe social stigma that people would avoid it even when it was the rational choice has never been convincingly demonstrated by research. It was used by Congress to justify making bankruptcy harder in 2005. Lawmakers cited the stigma research as scientific support for BAPCPA. The research couldn't hold the weight. The stigma hypothesis was a feeling dressed up in citations, and Congress built a policy on it anyway, and the credit card industry funded the campaigns that pushed that policy, and the result was a legal system designed to make it harder for regular people to use a legal tool specifically designed for regular people. The people who feel the most shame about filing bankruptcy are, statistically, the people who tried hardest to avoid it. The shame you're carrying is evidence of conscientiousness. It is not evidence of failure. It is evidence that you spent a long time trying to do the right thing in a system that was actively lying to you about what the right thing was. That's the whole bit. The shame is the product. You're not the customer. You're the inventory. Patch notes. Rapid fire. A few final entries from the changelog. The Chapter 13 flag comes off your credit report 3 years sooner than Chapter 7. The slower class has the faster flag expiration. The devs clearly didn't playtest this. Tax debt can be discharged if the return is at least 3 years old and you don't have a history of evasion or fraud. Old tax debt has a discharge window. New tax debt doesn't. The 3-year rule exists and almost nobody knows it exists. Creditors will often settle pre-bankruptcy cases for pennies on the dollar to avoid losing everything in court. The threat of filing is sometimes worth more than filing. This is called leverage. The creditors have been using it on you for years. You are allowed to use it back. The score improvement starts within 6 months, not years. 6 months. If you've been white-knuckling through unmanageable debt because you think filing will ruin the next decade, made, the math does not support that fear. This has been New Game Plus Bankruptcy Edition. The next entry in the format covers getting fired, which has its own set of hidden mechanics, its own manufactured shame campaign, and its own surprisingly functional recovery curve. If the divorce episode brought you here, drop a comment. If this episode is the one that found you at 2 a.m. because you're trying to figure out if you're allowed to use the legal tool the government built specifically for this situation, you're allowed. The button exists. It works. Half the people who press the student loan won win. The devs put it in the game for a reason.